Welcome back to the Talking Schemes podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Chris Vaughan, one of our best players in our online Madden league, USFL. He is an air raid master. He coaches in real life, and he's one of the best virtual coaches that I know. Very glad to have you here, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We need to get you one of those sound machines so you've got like applause or something, like when you start doing the introduction. But it's good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
First off, how did you get into football, and also how did you get into football video games?
Well, I started as a middle school kid playing football, and I've played all the way up through high school and starting into college, and then got out of it and kind of fell back into it as soon as I got out of college into coaching. So I've been in football pretty much my entire life. As far as the video games piece, that goes back to Tecmo Bowl. I'm probably, if not the oldest member of USFL, so I played the original Tecmo Bowl and not the knockoff ones that they've released in the last 10 years.
Fantastic. When you were playing, what positions did you play?
I was a left tackle and a defensive end.
Same here. Well, I was a left tackle and a defensive tackle. I played tackle. When did you start studying real football schemes and like getting into some of the X's and O's beyond just learning maybe what your assignment was in your playbook when you were a player? But when did you start to get it on a more conceptual level?
Probably when we got into college. I had some really good high school coaches. Started in the wing T, ended up in the wishbone. Going into the I formation, and so I was exposed to that early, and then you get into college, and your college teams are doing all sorts of different stuff, and that was back in the late 90s when I got into college. So the spread option was just coming around, and people were just getting into that. So you start with that, and then you end up with run and shoot and air raid, and I learned the trap option. I taught myself the wing T to be able to coach it. So it's really getting into schemes probably started in college. So, late 90s, early 2000s. Took me a good 5 years to get out of college. So,
What are some of the coaches that you've admired and taken from in your development, both in real life, like in your personal life, and also, the guys you're watching on Saturday and Sunday?
I'm very fortunate in that, and that I've been exposed to some really, really good coaches. But just some of the names that people know would definitely be Hal Mummy. Lincoln Riley was a big influence, just because I had an opportunity to learn from him, as he was a young offensive coordinator as well. And then, North Carolina is kind of an air raid hotbed. So there's a lot of us around here. So Patrick Taylor, those guys are big influences in how I think and what I do.
What specific real-life scheme, offensive or defensive, are you passionate about running in Madden?
I definitely go air raid, and then and I do this with a tongue in cheek and a wink and a nod. Run and shoot is definitely one I love that one too. Even though I'm an offensive line guy, I love swinging the ball around.
How has running the air raid for you evolved, both in real life and then later? It's how you're applying some of those things to Madden.
People, when they think air raid, they think, Mike Leach and throwing the ball 80% of the time. But something that I picked up in learning the air raid from the guys who created it and the guys who run it along with me, is that the air raid is not necessarily specific plays. It is how a team practices, how a team, using the high tempo, how a team practices using the repetition-based system. Not necessarily, you have to run mesh, or you have to run verticals, or you have to run, shallow, whatever it is. So that's been the big thing for me is getting from the 8% pass into, what it's okay to run, into the more of the modern air raid where guys, line up 2 backs or 11 personnel and run the football.
Can you walk us through a specific play with the adjustments or setups that you run as part of the air raid that you feel that you have?
I would definitely go with 4 verticals, or in air raid terms we call 6. the big thing for 6 is that it can be run on any down versus anything, and it has adjustments to allow that. 6, if you were to go talk to Mike Leach or Hal Mummy or those guys, the X and the Z and the H and the Y at any point can settle down on their route tree or on their go, and really just find space. Patrick Taylor calls it finding grass. So wherever there's grass at, that's where the wide receiver is expected to kind of choke down in that area, and the quarterback's expected to get him the ball. So what you see in a lot of the graphics is you'll see kind of a fallout or a comeback or a curl by the inside guys, or comeback curl on the outside or a curl on the inside, and then the running back on a check down. As far as that goes, as far as in Madden, I usually this cycle of Madden has been iffy at best with 6. Last cycle we could bang on those interior seams versus cover 3. So I've had to adjust that a little bit more this Madden, and I'll use comebacks and I'll use shallow tags and I'll use ins and I'll use outs based on the grass that I see, based on how a defense lines up. Like I might use an out route by the Y or the H if there's no flat defender there immediately. I know there was a time that we played last week we played Arizona, and your guy that was on my tight end, he shuffled down inside to the line of scrimmage. Well, the next guy to defend the Y is a safety standing back there at 12 yards, so I tagged him on a quick out and threw him the ball right now. So you're talking 6, 7, 8 yards because the defense didn't have enough guys to cover down. I love calling this play, especially versus 1 high. Like I said, I will call it versus 2 high, but you got to be requires a few more adjustments that way. But I will primarily use comebacks by the X and the Z, or outs and shallows by the H and the Y's, and then put the F wherever those guys are not going. So I know there's a couple vertical plays where the F is either on a wheel or on a seam, and they'll run. I think one of them is the Y will run a shallow, and the F runs a seam. I don't use that specific play, but I will do that periodically, especially if my Y is going off, and I'm playing with Miami right now, so Gesicki's having a great game. People tend to key on him a little bit, and I can get the running back down the seam.
That's fantastic. What are 3 strengths that you feel that the air raid has over other schemes?
I was listening to the last podcast and listening to Scott, and he's talking about the if then stuff. Air raid has some of that, but it's not as prevalent as some other systems. And you and I have talked about this several times, but the progression is the thing. Like I look at how many safeties are high and what the leverage are on the corners, and then I call the play that in our system we should run versus 1 high or 2 high with corners off or corners down. So for me, it's ease of use. I know exactly what I'm running. If I see it on defense, if I see that I don't have to pay attention to coverage. I don't have to pay attention to where the roll is. If you're trying to roll and disguise it, I'm probably going to get a guy open because they're going to be out of place at the beginning of the play. So the big thing there is ease of use. The progressions are easy. At least for me, progressions are super easy. Just like the 6, I'm going to read it 1, 2, 3, 4 across. Or if I feel pressure coming, like playing you, I know there's pressure coming. Or I know JJ Watt's about to spike my guard on the ground and be in my face, so I'm going to read 1, 2 to check down. So I can get through the progressions quickly without having to wait for something to get open. So the progressions, the ease of use, and I just like to swing the ball around. So give me air raid and give me run and shoot.
One of my favorite Mike Leach quotes, that coverages do not exist, but the reads are secret.
They're going to be the same no matter what. And I think the thing that people miss oh, what's the progression of this play? Well, like, and we're not talking about necessarily Y cross here, but Y cross literally has 4 different progressions you can use based on what the quarterback sees and what the coaches see and what the defense is given. So, it's not a matter of, and 6 is the same way. I might start on the left. I might start on the right. If there's one high, I might start in the middle. I could very easily just go, H, Y, check down. So, it's kind of one of those things. If you know what the progressions are, you're really easy to be able to figure out where the defense is giving you space and just taking it.
I think one of the traits of some of the really great air raid quarterbacks is that while they know what the progressions are and the reads, it's when they know when to maybe go off that script based on what they've seen and how they the defense has been adjusting. I think of Johnny Manziel in particular and how well he really excelled at that. I don't feel like he probably always did things the way Cliff Kingsbury drew it up, but he got it there. What are some other air raid quarterbacks that you feel?
I guarantee he didn't do things the way
you feel are just have been excellent at that level of understanding not necessarily the game of football, but understanding the field of football, knowing their surroundings and being able to always make those right reads, even if it maybe was off script. Is there any quarterbacks in particular that jump out to you other than Johnny?
See, the thing, everybody says, oh, he's winging it. Yes and no. The ball gets out so fast with the air raid that those guys that can wing it, like Johnny did, were so different. I questioned whether or not he actually knew what all the progressions were. Because if you take the same type of system, and you put Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, they were doing a lot of the exact same stuff at Oklahoma. Had better talent around them, but is what it is. Hey, A&M, and A&M is no slouch. I mean, Mike Evans was there. He had some dudes. But you look at those guys, it's about staying in within the progression within the offense. And those guys that can get out and do some stuff on their own, that's great. They're allowed to do it. But this is not, when you talk about guys that get out and get off script, it's not like you're talking about, Lamar getting out or Mike Vick or, getting out. They're just not doing that. The ball's coming out too fast.
What do you feel are 3 weaknesses of this scheme, the air raid, and what are some ways maybe to lessen them?
I don't think there is a weakness in the air raid, man. Honestly, the big thing is, the weakness for this is more a mentality thing. In real life, we will run the quarterback, we will run jet sweeps, we will run the running backs. Like, we have a legit, robust run game mixed in with our air raid stuff. We do. In game, it's a lot harder to do that just because, especially in USFL, where we have, play limits and, we try to limit how big the playbooks are because you can't run everything anyway. So, it's more of a mindset type thing where, hey, if they're giving me a 5-man box, I should be running the football, and I don't care how many times I have to run it. That's one of the things, and I still do it because I'll get out there and you got a 4-down line with 1 linebacker in the box, 5-man blockers, and I've got a quarterback that can run a little bit. Why in the world am I throwing the football into that? And I have to catch myself doing it. So the weakness there is more a mentality thing where I know my passes are good and my schemes are good and I can complete them regardless, but I need to still run the ball when it's given to me. So that's probably the idea that you can't run out of the run and shoot. I think a lot of people have kind of gotten over that more so. They say air raid, and they, for a while there, you and I went back and forth on this about the whole power raid thing. Air raid is not necessarily Mike Leach running 80% passes. Mike Leach doesn't ever call a run play. His quarterbacks have to put him in run play, which is why people why do you call a run? Well, the quarterback didn't call the run. The quarterback thought he had something he liked, so he took it. So that's kind of the big thing is just the idea that they're not a strong run game, and then the mentality that you have to say, okay, I'm just going to run the ball here. And I think Madden has helped, as far as inside Madden, that is, a lot of the screens, quick screens that are such a huge part of the air raid are in RPOs, and that at least lets you kind of sneak that run game in there a little bit.
I think one of the things that on that point that I really learned from studying Ryan Day's stuff, and I know he's not air raid, he's spread, but this past year I really dug into a lot of his material, and just the idea from the spread guys that, if it's one high, you're going to have, play action plays, and you're going to have a passing game that can attack that really well. But when they have two high, they're mostly looking to run. Like, that is their mentality. And it was something I've always been an air raid and a run and shoot guy. And I would just have two high beaters in my back pocket that I would always pull out. And then by, halfway through the game, I'm like, my opponent's already seen all my two high beaters. And now what am I doing? And being able to mix in more of that run game when they do give you that light box and optioning with the quarterback, I feel like is opened up a lot of things for me offensively. And it sounds like you're kind of at that same exact point.
I've been there a long time in real life, and in Madden, it's like, it's Madden. I'm going to freaking sling it. But the big thing with that, for me, now I was in a pistol option way back when, like my first 2 years coaching. And I go in, and the head coach, I'm coaching defensive line, and he says, I'm going to make you the offensive coordinator for JV. And I said, okay. He hands me a Utah playbook, Urban Meyer. And in that Utah playbook, everybody probably has it now. It's out there. He talks about, throwing against one high and running against two high. Like in that playbook way back when they were with Alex Smith in Utah. And that's kind of where I got into spread and spread option stuff. So that's been that mentality has been around forever. People doing that kind of stuff. And that you just found it with Ryan Day is kind of funny. You figured you studied enough football that you'd have that already down by now.
Yeah, it's all a process. I feel like I'm always learning something new. This whole year, I've really spent a lot of time in the run game, and like I've sat there and I figured out what runs work versus what fronts more consistently and more reliably, because I was just so frustrated by when I do take those downs to run, and then it's a 1 yard gain or it's for a loss, and I'm like, how are they blowing up my run all the time? So I finally spent the time to really invest in learning the run game and studying running systems a lot more in the last year, probably, after being just such a passaholic for so many years. But it's been a process.
I'm still going to be a passaholic.
I've definitely been more inspired by Mike Leach and, obviously June Jones. Those are my two biggest influences. So that 80% mark has always seemed about right to me. But being able to tone that down to 65% has been, I think, really good.
I'm not trying to. I don't even care. I'll be honest. It goes back to the Leach thing about balance. I don't care the run versus pass type thing, and I love because when I play on a monitor, and I have our Discord up next to us usually, and the game day chat's like, run the damn ball, run the ball, and I'm sort of going, I'm not running the ball. I should be running the ball, but I'm not. And just trying to, for me, it's been trying to figure out. I've added some tight end plays and H-back plays, and that brings that guy back in the box, which makes deciding to run or not run a little bit more difficult. So I've been kind of, that's been a big change for me this year. And then I've added, for the longest time, since I came into the league, honestly, I've been running the spread Y flex, spread Y slot stuff, and that's about it. Like the whole thing was based out of 2x2. I'm running more trips. I'm running more 8-back. I'm doing some other stuff that I didn't do, and the adding the RPOs this year has been a lot of fun because I've scored on several of those bubbles and screens, and people jump out there and I can run for 7 yards with the quarterback. It's like, hey, you know what? It's 2nd and 3. Let me run stick.
What are 3 things that you've learned that you see other people miss when they run the offense that, either it grinds your gears or you wish they understood, or, just what are a few things like that?
The big thing is the progressions. It's 1 high, so I'm going to throw the seams on 6. Well, in this cycle, match quarters just basically kills 6 as far as in the seams. I mean, it just absolutely just wipes it out because they carry those guys. You can't throw it. So, understanding that, the seams aren't there in 3 match. So I'm definitely throwing either a comeback or I've got to check it down to the back or I have to change it to something else. I think the big thing is, and then I'm almost afraid to say this out loud because people can listen to this and start doing it to me. 6 is 4 verticals, but it can basically become anything else. Anything, with vertical stems. It can become stick. It can become, sail. It can become all of those things. Like the other day I was playing around with turning it on 1st and 10, turning it into a levels play. Versus a 2 high look because you have the bender by the 8s usually. So, understanding that the offense is not set in stone, if that makes sense, where you can change things and it's okay, and it would still be, I think the one I wish I could do more with is calling outside smokes. Like I love throwing smoke screens, love it, especially people playing quarters. If the corners are all 7 yards, but you can't make the other guy block.
There are a few screenplays and empty sets where they actually have some sort of pattern on the backside, and those are so good because then you can have the option of that screen or that backside, deep pattern. Are there any other things that really jump out at you about, how other people run the air raid when you see?
I mean, the big thing is and like we have a few guys that you get outside of the small playbook. Like we have some guys that they're air raid, but then they run the air raid staples, but then they get so far outside of the base air raid stuff. And that's one of the things I like about our league is that we have these I guess guidelines, if you'll call it that, guidelines. We only 12 plays that we run more than 3 times a game. Well, if you're only running certain things, like for me it's wide corner, I don't put wide corner on that because I'm only going to run it on the goal line. I don't ever run it otherwise. But just having guys that they might run. I'm trying to think who's somehow. I've been labbing with Buff Hamster lately, and he loves the we call it trail. It's the the shallow with the dig over top drive. He loves drive. He loves drive more than shallow. Well, he's replaced shallow in his offense with drive. So that's one of the cool things that about the offense is, hey, it's a small playbook, but you get to choose the things that you're really good at and you really like. So it's not necessarily something that something about missing, but it's about condensing and being really good at your 8 to 12 plays, if that makes sense.
I have a question, kind of following up on that. Why is it, do you think, that the drive hasn't become more of a common air raid play? It seems so in that same world, and a way to get the ball to that outside guy that you might not be able to otherwise as easily.
Well, here's the funny thing. I've been actually doing some research on that, and the big thing is, like, Lincoln Riley does run it. In the air raid, it's called trail, but because everything in the air raid is progression based, it doesn't fit the way West Coast teams and everybody else calls drive, if that makes sense. Because drive, typically you read a guy. Well, in the air raid, we don't do that. We read space where the routes are supposed to be going. So Lincoln Riley runs a play called trail, and I think everybody's kind of probably looked up at that playbook at this point. But it's a 3-by-1 play. They have a 1-on-1 with the X, and then the running back swings out, so they're reading the X to the swing, and then back to the shallow, back to the dig. So it's a really nice play. Like, it works on Madden the same way. I love it. Because nobody covers the running back. It makes me laugh. The only people that ever cover the running back are people that run cover 2, and then I'm probably throwing number 1.
Yep.
But it's a really nice play. And then some of the research that I've done, and Scott got me into this. I've been studying that 3-4 defense, the quarters defense. Well, that got me into watching the SEC championship game last year with Alabama and Georgia. Well, Alabama scored twice on drive, and they actually ran drive like levels. So number 3 would run the drag, number 2 would run the dig, and number 1 broke in like levels. And I looked at that and I went, that looks pretty cool. So I've been trying to work that into Madden, but I don't run drive enough to really pull that out. It's not one of my called plays, so I've been practicing with that some and playing with that. But
I think add that to my running shoot. I like that as a variation on levels, because that really does get that horizontal stretch even like wider. Like, that really pulls that linebacker immediately.
I did that last year on run and shoot. That was all the inside dig, because the inside in is better this year than it was last year. In last year's Madden.
Oh yeah.
So I would always put that guy on a shallow, on a drag, so he would get his butt on a cross there. Because what happens is those guys get banged around, and then
the timing gets all messed up, and then
well, and the over is in the same spot as the under, and somebody will just stand right in the middle of the two of them and jump up and pick it off and try to throw it over his head. It's annoying.
And that's why I moved away from choice this year. I really have loved choice in the past in Madden, but this year I felt like it just wasn't very viable. But
I told you this was going to happen. I love watching. We have 4 guys running run and shoot, and all of you guys are so different from how I would run it. And I ran it the last 2 years, but it's so different. Like, you called me. I was old school run and shoot guy, and that's probably right, because I like the option.
Well, you stick to the just purely. You run 4 verticals like this, pretty much. You run go, you run slide, you run choice, you run a draw, you run a trap, and maybe run HB base. I think that's maybe.
I run levels.
You run levels,
and I run a flood. That's it. I don't need anything else.
Oh, if you go back to like the '80s run and shoot, the USFL, the Houston Gamblers, like they're all like, their 2-game. All their 2x2 game was basically variations on 6, but that's all they ran.
Yeah.
And then they had the trips package, which was a little bit, different, but it essentially usually turned into some other version of verticals. Like, here's my
I've watched all of you guys play over the past week, and it's like, why in the world would you? I don't run my quarterback. Like, I don't run my quarterback. I don't.
Oh, it's
I want to throw it
for me.
And I don't. If it's not 5, I don't look at numbers outside of 5 in the box.
If there's 5 in the box, and I have 5 blockers and no tight ends in, then I have a numbers advantage if I read, because now I have a 5-on-4.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if you have 5 in the box, I'm probably going to be in trips, and you better have a guy over so I know it's man to man. If not, I'm running slide until the cows come home.
Well, and that's where I love being in true 4 wide with 10 personnel, is when you go into trips, they can't halfway be in the box, halfway be out.
No.
They are making a choice. Are you in the box or out? Because if you're in between, I'm running bubble on your ass, or I'm getting that ball to him some other way really fast, and I'm going to make that guy look like a moron for being out of position. But
and before everybody goes, oh my God, this is not a run and shoot podcast. The same thing applies to the air raid. It's the exact same thing. It is the exact same thing.
June Jones won me when he wrote an article for a coaching conference, and it was entitled to those who love to pass. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I like this guy. I like the way he thinks.
and I'm an offensive line coach, but I'm still like, everybody says, oh, you're an offensive line coach. You like to run the football. Yeah, I don't mind running the football. But big plays come in the passing game, point blank period. And I want to swing the football.
One thing I've thought about a lot is like taking a step back and looking at the game and how it's evolved and how it's evolving, how it's changing. To me, it seems like if you go way back in the day, it was really a 4-back offense because you had like the original single wing stuff, and then you moved to like more of a 3-back world with wishbone and some of the Notre Dame box stuff and double wing kind of, and then eventually it moved to that I-form split back near far world there in the 70s and 80s, and now we've been firmly in this 1-back world. It seems like the number of backs keeps decreasing and they keep adding more receivers. Do you think that it's possible, first off, that we could see a full empty offense? I know a couple Maddens ago, Fury in our league, he tried to do an empty air raid, and then he would have a few running sets he would motion to when he needed to run. He would be an empty, but then he'd have his QB run game and empty, of course. I think he had Jalen Hurts with the Jaguars. I don't know how that happened. That was a couple trades, but I don't remember. But he had Jalen Hurts, who was essentially his running back / quarterback / point guard, and then he would audible into like Trey open or Trey open offset or something and run 5-6 trap, or he would run QB wrap and spread double flex, and that was basically his run game, was those two formations. Do you think something like that is actually viable, or do you think that there's limitations in how the game is set up right now, where a move to a no-back world as more than just an exotic thing is doable? And if so, would it be context?
Do you remember a few years ago when Matt Mock was at Missouri?
Yeah.
They were almost like 70% empty.
Okay.
So it's happened. Now, good luck finding the film because I've never been able to find it. And I don't know. I don't even know. I think there were more spread type stuff. I don't know if they were necessarily air raid. But he slung the ball over the place. But do I think it'll necessarily go entirely to that? No, I don't think so. Especially high school, maybe. Like our empty package this year is going to be silly. Our quarterback's committed to Arkansas State and runs a 4.5 and slings the ball all over the field. So, for him, yeah, we'll probably go empty and run the football with him off a jet sweep and off of our passing game and all that kind of stuff. Getting to higher levels, I doubt you see more than 20% of empty plays, or even less than that probably, especially when you get to the NFL. Outside of Lamar, who are you putting back there to run the football that you want him to get hit every time? What they pay for quarterbacks, I don't think it'll ever become a complete 5-wide system. I don't think that'll ever happen.
In the program to one of the Super Bowls in the early 90s, I want to say it was like 91, maybe it was 90, the program talked about what a possible future in the NFL might look like. And it was doing a news report about the year 2024 and how half the league now runs the run and shoot offense. And it had all these other in-jokes about what they thought the future would be like in the NFL and this program. And that in particular jumped out to me, in that at the time it was viewed as being the offense of the future. And since then, obviously, we've seen the air raid kind of do a lot of the stuff the run and shoot was doing, but do it simpler and do it more efficiently. Not all the same stuff, but the 6 game in particular really translates pretty well between both worlds. And one thing that was apparent to me when you read the interviews and listen to the interviews that Hal Mumme and June Jones did when they were at SMU about merging their offenses together. as they laid out their
Mm-hmm.
plays, they realized, oh, you got a play called sail. That's pretty much what I call Houston. Oh, you got a play called
Yes.
six. Well, I got one here called we used to call it touchdown, but now we call it streak. As
Yep.
they went through their playbook, um, they realized a lot of the plays had people ending up in the same place. Slide and wide corner were kind of similar, especially they used to have a tag on slide, which made that inside guy run the poster corner, which turns out almost exactly in the same places.
Yeah, slide is more Y corner or 96, which is kind of funny.
Yes.
Like nobody runs 96 anymore. 96 was curl flats. But it's the same stuff.
It's like slants though too. Like slants were also another thing that was part of that original core package that no one really runs that slant package as a thing by itself anymore. It's on the backside of something maybe, but
Yep.
It's not its own thing anymore.
And those are typically, there's a lot of guys, especially air raid guys, that and then the spread guys got into this too, where they call a beater on one side and a beater on the other side, and the double slants or the slant bubble or dragon or whatever you want to call it, whatever the West Coast verbiage is, I think is what the Madden playbook has it as. That stuff was big, but then, when are you using it? Because if for example, if I'm running stick on too high with the corner off, well, why would I run slant bubble there if I know I'm going to run stick?
Absolutely.
And the big thing with the air raid is to contract it so it's an execution based offense. So if I can cut a play out and still get the same thing, why would I not do that? Which is how the whole, beater on one side and, two high beater on one side, one high beater on the other, kind of came about.
With me in the air raid, I found that I don't really carry slot outs, and it's not because I don't like to play slot outs. In some Maddens it's better than others, but it's because I'm already carrying every version of Y cross that I like, and on the front end of most of those is slot outs. And I would rather have it there where if it's not there, then I have a crosser coming over top that I know will be there if they're both gone pretty much, almost always for me. As opposed to, oh no, that side's gone. Oh no, the other side had the same timing. So now my eyes are flying over to the other side, hoping to catch if someone's open or not before the window's gone. I don't like being rushed that way. So for me, that play is right out of my air raid playbook, even though I could see reasons to include it because, it is an old play that, is still there. It means Friday.
Friday go out, yeah. All right. So the reason it doesn't really work in Madden is because typically those overhang defenders, and you think about it as a one high where they're rolled down, those guys are typically inside shade, shaded inside, apexing in between the H and the Y. And in Madden, they're not. They're lined up directly on them, which means if you're hard flatted, that guy's going to actually beat your guy on the out. So there's no leverage there to run that play. So no, I don't carry it at all.
I found that in Madden 20, for instance, in going back to the run and shoot, there's the double outs play, which is very similar. And again, another example where the run and shoot and air raid kind of have an overlap. It's kind of stick and it's kind of Friday kind of merged together in trips form. In past Maddens, it's been very effective. It used to be one of my go-to plays on third and short. Third and short when you need a yard, that's the play I'm running. I know I'm going to get 3 yards for sure. And this Madden in particular, and last Madden to a lesser degree, it hasn't been there. So that is the way Madden plays it now, but I do believe the way the game plays and what routes are effective, how coverage reacts and responds and plays, it seems to vary game to game. And I don't know why. It seems like that would be something they could more or less control for the most part. But for some reason, every game, different plays will just hit different. I've had years where the hitch on Smash was just wide open for me every time, and other times it's never open, only the corner is, but the corner comes open versus cover 3 instead of cover 2, and sometimes it makes sense logically and sometimes it really doesn't.
But the thing about some of the plays, like last year, Wycross was so good, and this year it's Wassail. Like all the sail routes, the flood routes, they're so ridiculously good this year. Whether you're talking about run and shoot, or you're talking about air raid, or you're talking about the ones with the like Houston that have the corner route, behind the go. Like all of those plays are so good. And then they change, but from game to game. Like stick last year, I used to be able to get 7-8 yards running 2x2 stick.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm getting 4 or 5, maybe 6. So the coverages have kind of changed. It's almost like the what do they call it? In the MUT world they call it the meta. Each game they want to change the meta for what routes are really good versus everything. And this year I think it's all the floods.
It used to be that certain screens would be good and certain ones would be bad, but it wouldn't be just like specific plays. There were games where no flanker screen could ever get you a positive yard. It was either going to be picked or it was going to be broken up. Like it's like what? But the bubbles would be 6 yards every time, and then the next man would come in, and bubbles will not work at all, and flankers were just wide open.
That was last year. Like I didn't keep RPOs at all last year. I barely ran any of the screens because none of the screens would get you there. Like in the air raid balance is everybody touching the ball. So if your X is not getting the ball, then you try to throw him a screen and get, so he gets some touches, or the Z, or whoever it is. So you're trying to get him touches that way, and it just didn't work. And then last year Smash, and then 60. I don't know if you remember, but 66 was the hitch with the scenes was such a great play. I don't even carry it in this match. It's terrible.
When your season wraps up in real life and you come back to the league, I'll have to have a report ready with, all right, here's what works, here's what doesn't.
I'm gonna come ask anyway.
Most air raid teams carry and utilize tight ends pretty regularly now, whereas 10 years ago that was more of the oddity. I remember when Gronkowski or when Jay Samaro were air raid tight ends, and it was like, oh, what are you doing with the tight end? And then they would do all this crazy stuff with them, and you're like, okay, I get it. Now it seems like that's more the norm. Do you think that is going to be here to stay? And do you think that do you think the air raid could even be effective the other direction, and even like more of a 12 personnel world? Is that something that's viable?
I think so. I mean, you consider the air raid when it was first created, when they built the air raid, Hal Mummy and Mike Leach, it was a 21 personnel offense.
Yeah.
It was a split back under center with a tight end. He would flex sometimes. The X and the Z would move. The Y stayed on the right. Like it was a two-back offense. I mean, it's not new. Now, it's more fun when you can spread people out. There's more space. It allows you to take advantage of all 53 and a third yards from sideline to sideline. But as far as use of the tight ends, when you talk about Gronk and you talk about, guys like Kamara, and you talk about guys, like Andrews in Baltimore, Ertz and Gesicki, and guys that are so athletic, so big, and can just do so. Pitts down in Atlanta this year, like Pitts would be unbelievable in the air raid. Where's D-May needs to go ahead and trade that guy on over to me so I can show everybody how to use a tight end. But it's kind of one of those things. As long as parents keep putting guys that are 6'5", 260, and can run like deer out there, the tight end is still going to be a huge thing. I think a lot of what you're going to see, and I think you kind of got a glimpse of it when Lincoln Riley got to Oklahoma, when he had Flowers and Andrews. Flowers is a better blocker, but he can still run and catch. Andrews is obviously a top of the line, offensive tight end. They would put both those guys on the field in wing sets and put Andrews, out in the slot, and have, CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood at X and Z, and run a lot of 12 personnel stuff. And I think if you start seeing guys like Pitts, athletic tight ends like that, like if you think about back to old school, like can you imagine what Gates would have been like if he'd played in a freaking in an air raid, where they would have flexed him out? Like they they did it late in his career. Jimmy Graham, same way. Like those older guys that could run like that, it'd have been amazing. But the air raid at that point wasn't in the league. But to your question about the article, about the run and shoot, it did go the opposite way. It went the opposite way in that half the league is running wide zone right now. But I think if you were to look at what those guys are doing, is the wide zone is still very much, hey, we're running these things. And it's how we practice. It's how we run certain plays. Everybody runs some version of mesh now, whether it's 92 rail or whether it's the old school 92. Everybody runs some form of verticals. 6 is just a little more, I guess, a overall better play in my opinion, just because it can do so much. Some people just run it as 4 verticals, which is probably why people don't do it as much as I do. But it still goes the same way. And as long as you have, you look at guys like Tunyon in Green Bay, like he's not necessarily an air raid guy, but he runs so well and catches the ball so well. And then on top of that, he blocks so well. Why would you not put him in position to let him go do that?
This marks 2 podcasts in a row where he's gotten a lot of love. I don't really hear many people talk about Robert Tonyan that much, but I just find that interesting. Two podcasts in a row, I've heard that same compliment.
I started as a wing T tight end, so I love tight ends. And I remember when I first came into the league, you were trying to talk me into running a 4 wide receiver air raid.
I'm always trying to get people. I've always been a tight end denier. I don't like them. Pitts was fine. I've obviously used tight ends, been forced to by Madden or in times I've chosen to. I ran a 2 tight end spread offense with Atlanta, and
with Pitts and Gesicki. But I bet it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good for the run game, but when it comes to the passing world, I just think you gain so much from being in 10 personnel. I feel like it's only negatives. I don't want another guy in the box. I want a guy
that I can see.
Get lined up on a linebacker, not a big clunker. That being said, what I do like tight ends for is jet sweeps. I am a nut for putting a tight end on a jet sweep and using them like their own.
I don't get it. But you like those big running backs too, though. Like you want to do this too.
Going up against a 205-pound corner, I will take those odds. He will run him over and keep moving.
I want 90 something speed all across my every skill position. Then when I throw that little swing pass on stick, a little flat route on stick, he turns the corner and runs for 11. Now this game doesn't let me do that, but that's what I want.
I'd ask Scott, what were the rating sizes and skill sets you look at for each position? I would like to add one other thing when it comes to the air raid. There's been so many successful air raid teams that have captured people's imaginations, that have been their own Cinderella stories. There's so many great teams over the years with so many great players. If you could give 1 or 2 or even 3 if you could, examples of the archetype that you look for at every position, I think that could maybe be more useful than just saying ratings, because I think everyone's going to say, the quarterback with the biggest arm, with the most mobility, and the receivers that are all 97 speed. It's easy to say that stuff, but for really each position, especially the offensive weapons, if you could maybe say, okay, I really like guys like this, and it could be, those guys that have ran it in real life at those positions, or maybe just who in the NFL that everyone knows, would be a good fit for that position.
Anybody in the league by now that hasn't figured out that I'm a speed whore, there's nothing I can do for you. I love those guys that are 97, 99 speed. That's why I have the Dolphins right now. But it's a matter of, and I think my entire receiving core, I have my slowest guys like a 92. So as far as ratings for where things go, I want a deep threat tight end, because the plays that I like to run and the formations that I like to run the air raid out of, they have that tight end there. Spread wide slot, you can't take the tight end out of the game. But I want a guy that can run and can catch. So, Mark Andrews is the guy that comes to mind. I love having Mark Andrews in that spot. I was able to trade for him when I had Carolina last year, and that was fun. Gesicki's done well for me. Pitts would be unbelievable. Like guys that can run. For the H, I'm looking for speed. As much speed as I can get because I'm going to run jet sweeps. I'm going to run shallow. I need him to get where he's going and get there fast because, especially like we've been talking about 6, if they run cover 3, I need that ball to come out. So I need him to get past whoever's over top of him and by alignment. I need him to get past that guy immediately so I can throw the ball. X and Z are kind of guys that can be, I'd love for them to have that speed, but they don't necessarily have to be. They need to be guys that are good route runners. They need to be guys that can get open and go up and make plays because I will throw the ball up. I think one of the things about verticals that is always a lot of fun, unless you have guys that have man-to-man 96 and 90 on the corners, is I'm going to press you and I'm going to throw the ball vertical on the outside. Kind of goes back to the Texas Tech play with Crabtree against Texas. They ran 3 plays, all 3 of them were 6, and they threw a back shoulder to him. He turned and made one guy miss and ran into the end zone to win the game. I need guys that can go make a play on the outside. So you can go with your bigger guys. If you can get 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" with speed, that's great. Right now my X is actually Waddle. So he's got speed, he's got good route running, and he'll take the top off the defense. And I have Tyreek at H, so it kind of makes that a good combination. But the H's are speed guys. Your X need to be great route runners. Need to be able to go up and make catches or catch in traffic, that type of thing. For F, you and I disagree on this, but I've done both and I'm okay with it. I like speed guys just because I'm trying to throw the ball out to him. But if you have a big guy that can run inside, it's not going to hurt you either. It's just a matter of he's got to be able to catch. And then as far as quarterback goes, everybody's going to say the strongest arm, but I don't necessarily throw the ball deep like that. It's not like I'm going to play action pass and throw bombs. I'm usually throwing short or throwing medium. So for me, I'm looking for accuracies and, average arm strength. So like Tua, I'm using Tua right now. Tua's, second in the league, second or third or whatever he is right now in the league in passing. Because he's got great accuracy. His arm strength, I've gotten it to 88. I don't know what it started as. I don't even remember. But just a guy that can get the ball where it needs to go and not throw it to the other team. As far as offensive line goes, for some reason they've got air raid with pass pro on every position except right tackle, and they've got power at right tackle. I have no clue why they do that. Like, I have no clue. It makes no sense to me because all the air raid plays are in plays with the running back on the right-hand side, so the run plays all run to the left. So it's not like you're going to ever use him. But pass pro guys are the best way to go with that.
I always get into debates with guys about what were the best air raid teams. I did a poll a year ago on my group, Air Raid 101. If you're listening and you haven't checked it out, it's on Facebook. It's one of the oldest and the largest air raid communities online.
I think that community is how we met way back when.
A lot of people have met. It's been a fantastic place for meeting people. I met AJ Smith and Hal Mummy, and I met a bunch of other people through running that, and it's been an absolute blessing. It's weird. I used to look up to all these guys like Salas and Colthorpe and Mackey. I mean, those guys online.
All the North Carolina guys except Mackey.
Well, I mean, those guys for sure. And now, they're all on my timeline all the time. Dan Gonzalez. I mean, there's so many of these guys. Like Dan was featured so much on the old Smart Football blog. I don't know if you ever read that, but that was the best. And it was he was always over there. And then I ended up on Coach Huey's and on Coach Huey's forums. A lot of those same guys were all there, and then when they all showed up in my group,
I did. I was on that too. Yep.
It was just it made me, and I had to have these interactions with these guys. It's amazing. Had an exchange the other day with someone that was wondering something about Kevin Kilbride being on the Gamblers, and I responded, "Oh, he wasn't. He never coached there, but he's, for some reason, someone put his name on the front of a playbook that's floating around the internet. And then the guy that runs the website, Football Exos, he was in the group, and he was like, "Oh, actually, it was me. I made a mistake years ago. Blah 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 blah. I just added that cover on so it would look blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, that guy's here, the guy that runs that website with all the playbooks that everyone loves. Yeah, it's been a real blessing. But I did a poll over there about what was the best, most iconic air raid team, and I think the answer everyone came back with was one of the early 2000s Red Raiders teams.
2003.
I think that was the number one consensus. I thought it would
the one with Crabtree.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe it would be the national championship Sooners team.
But he wasn't there.
He was after him.
Yeah, that was after he'd already gone.
Yeah, I know it wasn't Leach, but it was his system. I think especially
but they had gone away from the air raid monitor at that point.
What team would you say? You say it would be the Crabtree year? What was that? 2009?
The team was silly. They had Crabtree. They had Welker was there too.
No, Welker was already gone. It was Amendola and Crabtree.
Amendola, that's who it was.
There was one or two other guys that made the league, but they were like, 6th round picks.
They were in and out. Yeah. It would probably be them.
He had a good running back too. That he played for the Raiders, I feel like.
Yes. Yeah. Washington.
Yeah.
Washington, I think was his name. So that team, I'm gonna go ECU right before Lincoln Riley left.
That's where you had the interaction.
That's where I had yes.
That makes sense.
So
yeah, they were briefly on the national attention.
They were averaging like 70 points a game.
Yeah.
Like they had Cardin at quarterback. They had a receiver that ended up in the NFL. And so I was down there coaching in Greenville, and learned the trap option and had access to ECU, and Ruffin McNeil got hired, and he brought in this young guy, this little hotshot offensive coordinator. I was like, oh, he's a young guy, he's younger than me. I started spending time over there with him and learned the air raid from him, and I was like, oh my God, dude is brilliant. And spending time around practice, and the way they practice, the way they call things, the way they do things, it is so organized and so specific. That team, like they were running inside zone and outside zone and had a draw. Like that was their entire run game. And then they had RPOs off of it, and they ran a PA Y-cross. Then they ran screens off of all this stuff, and they just beat the wheels off people that year. I think they ended up losing 2 or 3 games. They lost to like Virginia Tech barely, NC State barely, and they hung like 72 on Carolina that year. It just that team was easily one of my favorite air raid teams. And then you have to go. And this one's tough because you got to pick at least one of the Oklahoma teams. 17 and 18 was 17. Which is 18 Kyler's first year? Is that the one that was Kyler's first year?
18 was Kyler's only year. 17 was Baker's final year.
Final year. So 17 and 18, you got to pick one of those two teams. So you give me.
For me, that's 18, but I'm a Kyler stan, so.
The stuff, well, they changed a lot of what and this goes back to the whole thing about, with the offense, it's not, necessarily specific plays. It's that you pick things that worked for what they had. They didn't run the same things with Kyler that they ran with Baker. And then when Hurts got there, they didn't run the same thing with Hurts that they did with Kyler and Baker before that.
Yeah.
They changed the offense based on who they had and the players that they had. But you give me that Texas Tech team with Crabtree and those guys, and honestly, you can go any of the Texas Tech teams because they all slung the ball for 4,000 yards every single year.
It's like picking which one of those quarterbacks was the best.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go, which one?
One way, or it could be Cliff. It could be obviously Graham had
and none of them and none of them were great quarterbacks in the NFL. So you're talking about guys that don't have the strongest arms that were still able, the whole system quarterback thing.
Well, then they ended up getting the ultimate quarterback there later.
Well, you think about it. You think about how that happened, though. Cliff was back there.
Would you not maybe include one of those offensive teams from Texas Tech?
No.
Honestly, I think maybe the 15 team or...
No, I would not.
The defense was horrible, but that offense was...
Yeah, but the offense was good because of who the quarterback was. If you go back and watch the game that what is it? The one I don't remember. It was 17 maybe, maybe 18, 17, because Baker Mayfield went back. Where they both had like 600 yards passing or something, like some ridiculous number like that. It was like 1,200 yards of offense in the game. But Mahomes was running for his life against that Oklahoma defense. But because he was running for his life, he was able to use his arm and freaking fire the ball down the field and throw for 600 freaking yards. But yeah, for me, it's give me that Texas Tech team with Crabtree and those guys. I don't even remember who the quarterback was. I just remember Crabtree and Amendola were there. Give me the ECU team, and then I'll go 17 Oklahoma, because I know you're going to go 18. But just so you know, I put both of them two on the same platform.
And there was a clip I saw before on YouTube, and if I can find the link, I'll try and post it in the description. But Kirk Cousins was interviewing a couple of the different rookie quarterbacks that were coming out and doing board work, kind of like the Gruden thing, but not quite the Gruden thing. It was like a 5-minute version instead of a whole hour, 30-minute episode. And I forget which quarterback it was, but it was a quarterback that had been with Lincoln at ECU and then transferred out, I think, when Lincoln left. And I don't remember which one it was, but he was in the draft process, and he was doing board work with Kirk, and he said, okay, we'll draw up what your favorite play is. So he draws Y cross on the board, and he drew it with an option where the slot out that normally is there would have the option to make it like a 12-yard out in the event that it was quarters. So it would be like a specific quarters check. The quarterback would yell out something if he was expecting it or something. It was a special hand signal or something. And then he would run this 12-yard out. And it, like, Kirk Cousins' mind was blown. He was like, wow, that makes that good play that I've known for years, like, 11,000 times better. I need to go tell our coaches to incorporate this. This is genius. And did you have experience of that specific play when you were there at ECU? And does that surprise you at all that that's what he learned and that was his favorite play?
No, not at all, because it's one of my favorite plays still to this day. The original play did have the H on an option, but people forget that the offense was designed to be 21 personnel. So that guy came out of the backfield. So the reason it was an option is because he was a check for pass pro and then would sneak out. So he was late. He wasn't even in the progression. It'd be X, Y on the Y cross, Z on the post curl to the check to the F. Or he could go X, Y, and then down to the H. Well, they started figuring out when all this whole, the match quarters and all that kind of stuff came out, started happening. They started running that out. And that's actually how Mike Leach runs it specifically now. They don't even run it with the option anymore. So they run the out there, and it's a check for a lot of people, especially versus too high. They'll run that out, and that's exactly what they do with it. It's a 1-2, it's a high-low on that corner, and then they get back into the progression. Like, that's what I was talking about with knowing the progressions and how they change. One of my favorite plays in Madden is the one that still has the H on an option route. But I'll read that with the H as the first read, so I'm looking to get the ball out right now.
That's in gun spread.
Yep. So going H to Y to Z, and I won't even look at the X, especially if they're not pressed. If they're not pressed, and I'm not going to throw a fade ball. I don't even look at him. There are several tags. I don't want to give all my stuff away, but there are several tags that I'll use, especially on Y cross, that are really good. I know you don't like the bump in the middle of Y cross. You like the one that runs straight across. And by the way, I don't know, did I ever tell you this? If you put a wide receiver in that spot, it actually runs it like a normal Y cross instead of the man beater Y cross.
I did not know that. That would have been good to know. I guess that's something to do with the route running. What I don't like about the one that I call it the humpback version. No offense to people that are disformed in their backbone area. But Now I lost my train of thought. What I don't like about it is it usually gets too vertical and kind of just meanders in the middle of the field instead of cutting across. And I'm sitting there waiting, and now instead of this play taking 3 seconds for me to get the ball out, it's taking 5, maybe 6, and you just don't have that kind of time typically. That doesn't always happen, but I've had that happen to me too many times to where I'm like, I'm just not gonna go with that.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is just, coaching that play. The reason that thing is like that is for guys who are playing man. Like, that is a man beater route. So he will run the stair step like that, lean in on the guy on the Y, lean in on the guy, and then break across. That's why it's even there like that. But the Madden, they don't have that program necessarily the right way.
That reminds me, they had they changed curl flats for a few years in Madden back like Madden 15-ish, Madden 16, Madden 17 maybe, and then they did away with it. But they had the curl flats where there was a version where I guess if it was versus man or if it was versus certain look, if it had outside leverage maybe, instead of running the normal, they would break inwards with a inside release, stem up, and then go out and then hitch. It was a weird kind of curl. And then other times you would just run forward and do, just a normal button hook kind of curl. And then eventually they removed all of those option curl flats out. But it'd be that same idea. It should maybe have, both of those programmed in. And if you're in man, then it does the humpback thing into the middle of, La La Land. That makes sense. Then you might actually be getting somewhere depending on what the safeties are doing.
Yep.
But I think a lot of this could definitely change next Madden. One of the things that was so great in the beta was with this pass leading. Once you learn and figure it out, you can definitely start bending things and getting the ball to guys that are open in ways that I think is going to be a lot of fun within the context of this offense, especially on plays with longer route structures like 6.
If you tell me that I can run Y-cross correctly the way it's supposed to be run, where my Y will sit down right in front of a Tampa 2 linebacker, I might not run anything else. Y'all going to kick me out of the league because I'm just going to run Y-cross and just smoke people.
That's what bugs me so much about it being just meh is, in all reality, my favorite 2 probably air raid plays would be Y-cross and Matt, and 6 would be 3rd. Those are my top 3,
and I'm probably the different guy. Mesh is not one of my favorites. Oh no, in real life, I do like it a lot.
Oh, I like it.
In Madden, I don't.
I think it has answers for everything.
They screwed it up.
I think that the issue for the longest was that there's too big of a learning curve, but I don't think that's the case as much anymore. I don't know if it's because people have gotten better with teaching it or because it's being ran at every level, so kids have been running it since they were 5. I don't know. But I mean, mesh is everywhere. Everyone runs mesh now, so it can't be too expensive. That doesn't make
some version of it.
Yeah, I think that's the trick. It's finding the right version. And honestly, this will be our last question. I know you've got to go. Within Madden, they have a lot of I like to call them modern spread versions of classic air raid plays. So instead of just Y cross, you have the spot Y over play. And Panther Spot, I think it's called in one formation. And that's like really an updated version of Stick and Y Cross in one play. You have the Mesh Rail or Mesh Spot.
Rail.
There's 15 different names for it. Railroad. But you have the mesh with the halfback, running up the seam on a rail route, and then you have someone sitting over the middle of the field somewhere, and then there's a deep dig, or there's a corner, or there's some runoff, there's some vertical route. That's really, I feel like a newer version of mesh. There's a few others. I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but there's a lot of these more fresh takes. The red zone scissors is basically flood. It's your Y sail. It's F sail is what it is. I mean that's what it is. What do you think of those like more modern newfangled air raid remixes that are in the game? And do you think that you could maybe run a modern air raid to give it a lame name and be viable in Madden? And then that's my last question.
Yeah, it's better than power rate. I'll go ahead and tell you that's just a pet peeve. As far as mesh goes, mesh is expensive when you consider especially when you're coaching players, when they sit down and when they keep going. I think the thing that's made mesh more accessible to a lot of people is they don't bother with sitting down against zone anymore. So like mesh railroad and mesh rail is at 92 rails, what most air raid guys call it now, is they've completely changed the read. The running back on the wheel is the first read, but those meshes don't stop. So and then they put the sit back behind it at 12 to 10 yards. So they put that sit back there. Well, then you don't have to stop. They just keep on going. So if the linebacker's spread out, it opens up the sit back behind it. So I think the way that it's kind of adjusted a little bit has helped it. I would love for mesh to be a better play in Madden. It's just not. Like the outs. Last Madden, the outs and the corner routes were gold. So I ran mesh a butt ton. Now, I might if I ran mesh 10 times, I might throw the corner or the out once or twice. Otherwise, I'm probably throwing the back 5 times, which is, if I wanted to throw the back, I'll just throw sail. And then I have a chance of throwing the tight end. So the mesh is just not a great route. But I think, depending on how they set up the plays in other formations, like right now, I think it's in normal close or something like that. It's in the tight set.
It's not in any of the spreads.
Yeah, it's in tight. Yeah. It's in the wing sets. Like, those are great. I'd love to run them, and actually I have a couple of those in one of my playbooks. But it's not the way that sets up is not the same way, and the progression is not as fluid as I would like it to be, compared to regular mesh where they actually sit down, because that actually provides a little more. It's getting back to that whole triangle thing and the spacing that regular old 92 provides. I hope next year's Madden, with the whole passing thing, turns out better for mesh, because I'd love to run it some more. It's just not good right now.
What I really like about about railroad, mesh rail, mesh spot, mesh set, whatever you're going to want to call it.
It's all the same thing.
Is that rail route really puts the flat defender in an immediate bind, and he has to carry the halfback, because if he doesn't, he's releasing a vertical. So he has to. Mm-hmm. As soon as he does, the drag comes underneath him. It's stealing 8 yards at a time, and that's if you don't make any moves. If your receiver can turn the corner, if he has any speed, if he has any wiggle, if he can make a juke, you've now picked up way more than that. It's almost stealing, especially against one high. It's probably my favorite one high beater, because now you have a flat defender that's down low that is like completely kind of on an island almost, the way the leverage works out. He has to be right. It's kind of like Go in that way, where in the old run and shoot, again, we're taking it back to the run and shoot, but when that motion back comes across and he gets right past the other guy, and then whoop, here comes the swoop route underneath, and here comes that seam read. That flat defender is just screwed, especially if it's covered
in no man's land.
That's probably the best beater that's ever existed, and it just makes that flat defender wrong no matter what he does. And I think that mesh rail does the same thing in a completely different way. That I absolutely adore it, but
Yeah, see, for me, I like having the deep route. And this is still a horizontal stretch on the flat defender. It's instead of a vertical stretch, it's a horizontal stretch. But if you run just straight up 92, and I don't run the one out of Y slot, because it's got 2 outs. I run the one out of, I think it's Y flex, spread Y flex, that's got the corner out on one side. But what I look for with that is, if the corner takes off with the corner out, the flat defender has to get out to the running back. Well, if he gets out to the running back, then the other mesh is going to be open. If he sits in his zone, then you're throwing the running back, and the running back is getting 8 yards. It's a matter of, It's kind of the same thing, and they've kind of simplified it so you can so everybody's kind of running it. Like I'd love for them to figure out a way to run mesh to where you could run it a little more out of the spread sets. The 3x1 meshes are excellent. The way Lincoln Riley runs mesh, it's not in the game like at all. It's not.
Well, and that's what bugs me is Jeff Grimes runs this kind of mesh railroad that's like 30% of his passing game is variations on it, but he runs versions of it that are out of spread that mix in some of the air raid version with the outs on the outside. So I mean, like, it's definitely possible to do it. It's just you sacrifice having the double deep outs. You only have one because the other one now has to be your sit route. I do like the ones in the wing set. I don't know if you get into wing much, but it's the highlight of using those gun wings, and it's even in I think a single wing or two because you have that deep in over top that's 10 yards deeper than the sit. That if nothing else is open, that guy is usually wide open, like versus man especially.
The ball's usually out before you ever get to that.
Well, and that's the thing is if it's tight man and 1, 2, 3 are all gone, then that guy is just now making his end breaking route. Like the timing is, for me at least, lines up just about perfect. So I only really get to that if it's man.
That's one of those things where the programming is like, dude, if they're man to man, that running back is running a wheel with 2 built-in picks on the mesh play and the sit. There's no way that dude in the box is covering it. If it's man to man, it's a freaking touchdown. That's how everybody runs it. That's why people run it. And it's not programmed right.
Yeah, it's great listening to Sark, and he's just like, yeah, the last guy anyone's worried about covering on the field is the running back.
Yeah, nobody
so,
covers
what are we gonna do? We're gonna shovel it to that guy as often as we can.
Yeah,
and that guy, some of the guys they had there at Alabama, it's nasty.
Yeah, nobody covers a running back.
Well, and if they do, it's that linebacker, and maybe that linebacker is a freak.
Has to come out of the box.
Maybe you have Isaiah Simmons. Well, then cool. Maybe you can somewhat keep up with it some of the time, but you're not going to keep up with it all the time because of leverage.
Well, but if he runs out there, then you've got 2 crossing routes coming. Like it's that goes back to this whole thing with progression. If you follow the progression,
I love how ingenious the design of the play is. It makes me happy. I'm like, why did I never think of this? As soon as I figured it out and I heard Sark's clinic that came out a year and a half ago where he really deep dived into the play a bit. And then I started researching it more. I'm like, this is so genius. Why have people not been running this forever? What I still want in the game is I want to see Dana Holgerson's draw stick RPO.
It is in the game.
No, there's an inside zone stick.
Well, okay, it's not draw, but draw sucks in the game, though.
Draw does suck in the game, but I love the
idea. How about this? How about we get a draw that works?
Downfield penalty on a draw.
How about we get a draw that works?
Well, draw works if there's no backer in the box. For some reason, the backer never gets picked up is the problem with draw.
No, the problem with draw.
Maybe you could do with setting the mic and it would maybe pick him up, but that's the issue.
No, every time I run draw,
is the most viable.
Hey, every time I run draw, I get a snap that's high or way outside, and the quarterback has a hard time getting him the ball. I don't know why. I don't know if I pushed the button too hard.
It's programmed that way.
It's so silly.
Yeah, it's so strange. It's like if you come out on defense, if you come out in the cover one play where one of the safeties is a QB spy, for some reason you'll come out in it and the single deep safety will move to the middle of the field from over to the side, but that QB spy guy will just stand flat-footed. And it's the only way you can make it look that way. It's like the most obvious coverage in the game. And I don't know why it's programmed that way.
There's so many things that are programmed. It's just like, what are you doing? But, it's fun. I think the big thing for me is air raid. You've got the base plays, and then you can tag a lot of these things to get, what you want, things that'll, like I love tagging double under on Y-Cross. I love it. It's so much fun. Because you get a mesh look with the I think I did it against you. You get a mesh look with the running back in the slot, so everybody sees that and they're like, "Oh, I got it covered." It looks like why shallow? It'd be 8 shallow, but it looks like 8 shallow. Yeah, that Y is running all the way over there. You're gonna miss that dig, buddy, because it ain't coming. But yeah, and it works really well with the shallows. So that's what I end up doing to people who who like to try to take away my shallows.
I feel like in the old NCAA days, there was a play called weak flood that was like shallow cross, but instead of an N, it was an out. It was a deep out.
Mm-hmm.
There's still one or two of them, I think,
There
in Madden.
still is. Yep, there is.
It's in doubles or something, I think. Do you like that play? Have you ever used anything like that in real life? And if so,
no.
Is there a time or reason you would like that or not?
No, not really. I've seen, I know there's a couple of guys in the air raid community here in North Carolina that will actually run sail that way, so they can actually run their running back across to hold linebackers. So the under on sail will actually be a shallow coming from the backside. So there's a couple of people, Doobie Duvar is like that. They run it with an out, a go and an out, and then the shallow from the opposite side is the under instead of the running back. I've never found any use for it.
In Madden, you could almost do that with the humpback Y cross. Make that humpback Y cross, or what? That's what I call it. You're
gonna make me give away everything, aren't you?
If you put that cross onto a flat shallow, it would basically be that.
So yes. Sorry. But there's better. You're better off to just run the floods in that case, just because the programming is better for that in this Madden. The only time I ever put a drag on Y cross, I'll do it out of 2x2 with the double under, and then out of 3x1, I'll bring number 1 on a drag, because that will. Number 2, the one that's out. Because if you could tag a wheel, I'd tag him on a wheel, but you can't tag him on a wheel and get a curl wheel on the backside. That's what we do in real life. But I'll tag him on a drag, so you'll end up, and I know Adam does that too. You actually end up with a drag and then the Y cross over top of it. So it's almost like a drive, but they're much further apart, which I like about it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Talking Schemes podcast, episode 2. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment any questions down below. You can also join our Discord server where Coach Chris can enter into some of your questions that you may have about running 6 or the air raid. And as always,
stay scheming.